with the times.
Choro pyar, bada pranam, namaskar, sat shri akal, adab. What I really mean is love and blessings to the younger ones and respect to all my elders.
What a wonderful welcome.
This is Navniit Anand from Fiji Times, sitting in the office for the Honourable Mr. Jason Clare, the member for Blackland, Shadow Minister for Trades and Investment. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Recently, I think a few months ago, there's been Varghese report that has been out for quite some time now. According to you, has there been adequate responses to the report?
Well, not yet. The government commissioned Peter Varghese, the former head of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and the former Australian High Commissioner to India, to develop a report on how we can improve and strengthen trade ties between Australia and India. And that report was recently released, but the government haven't committed to implementing it yet. And we think it's a very good report. Labor thinks it's a very important report and a report that needs to be implemented.
So why do you think that they haven't responded adequately to the report so far?
Look,
I'll be talking to the other side to find out, but what do you think?
I'll be interested to know the answer.
Yes.
And I'm very hopeful that they do implement the report, because I think it's a very important report. They've been a bit distracted lately. They've been sort of changing prime ministers over the last few weeks. So maybe that's part of the explanation. What we need them to do is concentrate on that report, and hopefully they will. But if they don't, and if Labor wins the next election, then we have said that we most certainly will. Peter Varghese's identified 10 top priority recommendations. It's a big report, full of lots of practical ideas, and he's come up with 10 obvious things that we can start and do right now. And we've said that if we win the next election, then we'll do those right from the get-go.
So when do you think the elections, are there going to be any early election you're expecting, or they'll be still in May?
No, well, the election will be when the Prime Minister calls it. But I expect the election will be sometime in the first half of next year. So we're ready to go whenever the election will be held. And I think that there's a lot of Indian Australians, a lot of Fijian Indian Australians who understand better than the government how important the relationship between Australia and India is, and how the amount of trade between Australia and India is not what it should be. You know, it's massively underdone. Think about this for a second. We trade as much with New Zealand as we do with India. And New Zealand has a population of about 4.5 million, or about a quarter of the population of Delhi.
And the amount of the resources that India has.
That's right. And India is the fastest growing economy in the world. And soon it'll be the third biggest economy in the world. And we trade about as much with India as we do with New Zealand. It doesn't make sense. So what can we do to boost trade with India? That's what this report's about, and that's what we're focused on delivering.
So what is the response by ALP to this report?
Yeah, well, what we've said is this is a big, important report, particularly because it sets a long-term plan. One of the problems in the past has been that different Australian governments have had plans to increase trade with India, and then it started and stopped, a bit like a 2020 cricket match. We need a test match plan. We need a long-term plan. This is a long-term plan. What Peter Varghese's put together here are recommendations to implement over 15 years. And some of the immediate obvious recommendations are things like increasing the amount of direct flights from Sydney or Melbourne to India. At the moment, there's only one direct flight a day.
That's Air India.
That's Air India, Sydney to Delhi.
Sydney to Delhi.
That's the plane I'll be on the weekend.
Oh, right, lovely.
But there's about 10 flights to China every day, and about 14 to Singapore. If we can increase flights, we will also increase trade. What more can we do to increase the role that the 700,000 Indian Australians play in Australian businesses to help encourage more Australian businesses to export to India or to invest in India? They're the sorts of things that Peter raises in his report.
So what is your take on the two-way trade between India and Australia that can be initiated if your government comes into the power?
Yeah.
Let's see what happens, we don't know. But if it comes, so what would be the first step that would you be doing for the two-way trade between India and Australia other than the flights?
Yeah, okay. Well, one of the things that Peter Varghese says in his report is that every 2 years there should be a meeting between the Australian Treasurer and the Australian Trade Minister with the Indian Finance Minister and the Indian Commerce Minister to work on a plan to see that we're implementing all the things in these reports to build closer trade ties and closer economic ties between India and Australia. We'll do that. We also think that India should be part of APEC, that Asia-Pacific Economic Forum that includes China and the United States and Australia and Japan. It's that big economic forum that drives the trade rules of our region, and India is not part of it.
At the moment.
At the moment.
At the moment.
But it should be, right? And so we've said we'll get India involved in APEC, or at least make the case to the rest of Asia that India should be involved. We've also said we'd set up a consulate in Calcutta. That's another one of Peter's recommendations, and set up an infrastructure council made up of representatives of Australian businesses and Indian businesses to see what more work we can do together to help build the infrastructure that India needs.
And I would expect, when you said there should be a meeting every 2 years between the Australian Treasurer and the Indian Finance Minister and the Trade Minister, not only the MOU has been signed, they need to be executed.
That's right.
To move forward.
That's right.
There should be some accountability of the MOU that has been signed.
The easy thing is to develop a plan. The hard thing is to implement it. And you get accountability when the most senior politicians hold their bureaucrats to account at regular meetings and say, have you done this? Have you done that? What more do we need to do? So those meetings are important. And if we can get other organisations like the Australian Productivity Commission involved in those meetings, and that's what Peter's recommended, then that helps to drive reform as well.
Why do you think that is the case? The ELP says it is stagnated at the moment.
Well, the statistics bear it out. Over the last decade, trade between Australia and China has tripled. Over the same period of time, the number of Indian Australians has tripled. So we've seen massive increases in trade with Asia, massive increases in Indian Australian population, but we haven't seen massive increases in trade with India, at least not on the same levels. And what we're saying, what Peter's saying in his report, is we could do a lot better.
What initiatives are being taken by ALP as of now, and if the government comes into power?
So in addition to what Peter has recommended in his report, what we've said we would also do is we would hold annual trade missions to India. Australian government taking Australian businesses to India to look at export opportunities and investment opportunities in India. At the moment, that's every 2 years. We'd double that. We would make that an annual event. And given how big and important India is, as I said before, the fastest growing economy in the world, it makes sense to do that every year. We said we'd do that with China, we should do that with India as well. And one of the other things that we've committed to doing is creating an internship program where, if the Indian government agrees, we would send young Australians who've just finished a business degree or a commerce degree here in Australia and do a 6-month internship in Indian businesses in India.
Wonderful.
The reason that we would do that, and it would be reciprocal, Indian students could do the same here, is to get a better idea of Indian business culture. Because if you know how business works in India, you're more likely to come back to Australia, work for a company, and suggest to that company that they do more business in India. You need to know the market in order to want to invest in it.
Look, me being born in India, I would look forward to have whatever you're saying to be executed at the earliest. And as we are entering the festive season, on behalf of the Indian community, I would like to wish you a happy Diwali, and probably a happy Diwali wishes from your side to all our audiences.
Indeed, happy Diwali, and can I thank you for your time today. This is a really important topic, and it's one that we don't talk about enough in Australia. And I'm very glad that hopefully, as part of a shortened Labor government, if we win the next election, we'll be able to implement these policies and bring India and Australia even closer together.
Lovely. Thank you so much for your time. On behalf of Fiji Times, I extend you all my wishes to have a wonderful trip in India in the coming week. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Dream big, achieve big. Gemco Sydney. Any course, any uni. www.gemcoaustralia.com